Thank you for your interest in our seminar. I'm Rick, and I'll be your host.
My name is Henry, and I'll be the narrator.
And I'm Mary, Henry's assistant.
This presentation is about worldviews, Christianity versus secular naturalism. Secular is a belief that God does not exist. Naturalism is a worldview that regards the natural, material, and physical universe as the only reality.
For a while now, I've been researching and documenting material on Christianity and secular naturalism. I keep highlights of all the information I've gathered so far in a large binder. Today we'll be talking about some of these topics.
I notice your binder has a lot of index tabs. What kind of information is in there?
These are the various chapters on data I've been researching. Today we'll be talking briefly about some of these topics. For example, this is a chapter on Darwin's fallacies. Notice how the text in each chapter is shown as numbered individual segments.
Rick, if you don't mind, I have a few questions for you.
No problem. Ask away.
Why do you call the binder your book of knowledge?
Actually, it's more of a reference manual of several hundreds of hours of research.
Where did you get your information?
All of the material came from researching books, magazines, periodicals, seminars, the internet, videos, and DVDs.
And how can you tell if the information is facts or fiction, and what is true versus false?
First, I try to stick to reputable sources. Then I look at both sides of a position and gather as much data as I can.
How did you select the topics for this seminar?
Well, I must say, it was quite challenging selecting and condensing material for this presentation. As the title shows, all of the material is about Christianity versus secular naturalism. I was very careful to only include true facts and avoid opinions or social media propaganda.
So what have you learned so far?
There are overwhelming volumes of data both for or against religion. There are heated debates, arguments, and some even resort to name-calling. However, when it comes to Christianity versus secular naturalism, only one can be right. During the video, I will be sharing some knowledge. We'll have a little entertainment along the way, and there will be some humorous sections, but most important, I hope to get you to think about what you see in this presentation. Today's topics include intelligent design, science, logic, DNA, evolution, carbon-14 dating, the Big Bang Theory, manipulation, and deception. We'll be talking about how science and logic are being used to either prove God does or does not exist.
Wait a minute, I'm a Christian. I know God exists. So why do I care about these subjects?
If you are a parent or grandparent, aunt or uncle, brother or sister, teacher, student, pastor, elder, or a human being, you should care. And I'm going to show you why.
Isn't it interesting? No matter what subject you research, there are always hundreds of types of material, both for and against the topic.
That's true. But when it comes to God and the Bible, there is only one true book. This book never changed, evolved, replaced, or updated Scripture for 6,000 years. It contains 66 books, 1,189 chapters, 31,102 verses, and approximately 785,000 words.
I hear the secularists say, how can God work outside of science as we know it?
I believe it is insulting and arrogant for man to try and explain or even question God. Everything man needs to know about God and Christ is found in the Bible. Period. God is sovereign. He has no limitations. God is omnipotent, all-powerful. He is omniscient, all-knowing, and omnipresent, everywhere at the same time. God is transcendent. He exists beyond space and time, and all laws of nature and science do not apply to God. So, Henry, would you like to take over?
Sure, I'll be glad to, Rick. With Christianity, God's words are written in Bible scripture and tell us God created man, the earth, and the universe. Secular naturalists have theories developed by scientists who believe God does not exist.
My name is Charles and I'm an atheist. I believe evolution created man, not God, and the Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago by chance, not by God. Secular astronomers tell us the universe was created from a sudden Big Bang from a small point 13.8 billion years ago, not by God.
Christianity is facing problems today caused by secular naturalist worldviews. Non-believers are using science as a weapon against theology. Science is becoming a mechanism to disprove the Bible and the existence of God. Atheists are constantly attacking God and the Bible using theories like evolution, the Big Bang theory on the creation of the universe and the formation of the earth. Our social standards have become corrupt. False information is circulating throughout our schools, universities, and libraries. Scriptures are reinterpreted in an attempt to avoid conflicts with popular scientific ideas. Churches are compromising beliefs and using false science to explain the Bible. Social media promotes these views on TV, movies, internet, publications, and so on.
That's pretty scary. What can we do about this?
Today, with the latest scientific and technological advancements, we are able to disprove those secular theories. In science and technology, we've seen enormous advancements over the past few years. Technology is allowing us to verify the accuracy of facts found in the Bible. For example, DNA proves evolution is a myth and impossible. The Mount St. Helens eruption, along with several other volcanic explosions, proved the theories on the age and formation of the Earth were incorrect. The carbon-14 dating methods used to estimate the age of fossils and rock formations were wrong. The James Webb Space Telescope is finding several flaws in the Big Bang theory. Some of you may know who Paul Harvey is. For many years, he did short radio commentaries. Back in 1965, he did one called If I Were the Devil.
If I were the devil. If I were the devil. If I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. Thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Here's where we are today. Attacks on religion include: remove God from Pledge of Allegiance, remove prayer from schools, remove 10 Commandments, no public nativity scenes, no Christ in Christmas, and the list goes on.
How did this happen? What do you suggest we do?
I have an excellent place for these restrictions.
I see you will be talking about science and logic.
That's correct. Now, the next 2 sections may seem a little boring, but the topics are relevant to understanding this video. We'll begin with science, since it's the method used to try and disprove God's existence.
First, I have a few questions for the audience regarding secular naturalism creation theories. When have you ever seen something that was created from nothing? Where have you ever seen something spontaneously appear from nowhere? Have you ever seen something design and build itself? Wouldn't you say these are physically impossible? These things just don't make sense. They are both logically and scientifically impossible. Well, then what are the requirements to create something? You need a creator, a designer, and a builder. You need a reason or purpose, and you need intelligence.
Here are a few facts about the sciences. These laws apply to all sciences and are indisputable. The first law of thermodynamics states matter and energy can be neither created nor destroyed. There are no natural processes that can alter either matter or energy in this way. This means that there is no new matter or energy coming into existence, and there is no new matter or energy passing out of existence. The second law of thermodynamics is best summarized by saying that everything moves toward disorder, or a condition known as entropy. The law of biogenesis is the great pattern of all life. This law states life can only come from other pre-existing life. Organisms reproduce other organisms after their own kind. We have seen that this law is universal with no known exceptions. Chemistry is required for life. Our bodies are powered by chemical reactions and depend on the laws of chemistry operating in a uniform fashion. Mathematical laws. The laws of physics are highly mathematical in nature. They would not work if there were not also laws of mathematics. The laws of mathematics are an example of a transcendent truth. They must be true. All the laws of nature, from physics and chemistry to the law of biogenesis, depend on the laws of logic. Like mathematics, the laws of logic are transcendent truths. Without the laws of logic, reasoning would be impossible. The laws of nature are uniform. They do not change arbitrarily, and they apply throughout the whole cosmos. The laws of nature apply in the future just as they have applied in the past. This is one of the most basic assumptions in all of science. Without this assumption, science would be impossible. Information cannot originate in statistical processes. Chance plus time cannot create information, no matter how many chances or how much time is available. Information can only originate from an intelligent sender. There is no known law of nature, no known process, and no known sequence of events which can cause information to originate by itself in matter. More scientists are accepting that the great evidence of design all around us requires acknowledgement of a great designer. Acceptance of any other explanation forces them to deny reality.
Now I see. Science can be misused as a method to try and disprove God exists. However, with what we now have in science and technology, we can provide evidence of God's existence. I see the next topic is DNA. All I know about DNA is it's used in solving crimes. Why are you talking about DNA? What relevance is there to Christianity?
DNA is important in several ways. First, DNA disproves evolution on multiple levels. Second, God's intelligent design is required for DNA to exist. How DNA shows abortion is terminating life upon fertilization. How DNA shows transgender and gay behavior is against Scripture. And we even have a chapter on how viruses like COVID work with DNA. DNA is an information code system. Information always entails a symbolic code system. Language, meaning or action and purpose, information. There is no known law of nature, no known process, and no known sequence of events which can cause information to originate by itself in matter. Neither is there any physical process or material phenomenon known that can do this. Intelligence is a necessity in the origin of any informational code, including the genetic code, no matter how much time is given.
Now I'm beginning to see. Code is the work of an intelligent mind, and codes do not arise from chaos.
To summarize, it is not possible for a DNA code of any kind to arise by chance or accident. With DNA, nothing works unless everything works at the same time. It could not have gradually come into existence. The complexity and intricacy of the DNA molecule, combined with the staggering amount of chemically coded information it contains, speak unerringly to the fact that this supermolecule simply could not have happened by blind chance. DNA is so compact that a 1 square inch chip of DNA could encode all the information in over 7 billion Bibles. An important fact about DNA. DNA cannot add information, only remove information, making evolution impossible. I find this part absolutely amazing. Here we have the components of DNA, beginning with a human cell. A cell is the smallest, basic unit of life that is responsible for all of life's processes. Humans have approximately 37 trillion cells. The nucleus or center of a cell serves both as the repository of genetic information and as the cell's control center. Chromosomes are found in the nucleus of a cell. Each chromosome is made of protein and a single molecule of DNA. There are 23 pairs of chromosomes in each cell. That's 22 pairs plus 1 from each parent X and Y. A chromatid is one of the 2 identical halves of a chromosome that has been replicated in preparation for cell division. The centromere links a pair of sister chromatides together during cell division. A histone is a protein that provides structural support for a chromosome. The DNA wraps around complexes of histone proteins, giving the chromosome a more compact shape. The information in DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 nitrogen bases: A, adenine, G, guanine, C, cytosine, and T, thymine. The total number of base pairs found in the human genome cell is 3.1 billion. Nucleotides consist of a nitrogen base pair, sugar, and phosphate. Nucleotides are arranged in 2 long strands that form a spiral called a double helix. The 2 strands of nucleotides are wrapped in a twisted coil. 1 turn of a helix coil is made of 10 base pairs.
Let me see if I got this right. The cell needs all its basic parts with their various functions. For survival, if the cell had evolved, it would have meant that billions of parts would have had to come into existence at the same time, in the same place, and then simultaneously come together in a precise order. The removal of any single part of a cell causes the system to cease functioning, and therefore cease to live. All evolutionary explanations are unable to answer these questions.
You got it? That leads us to the next section on evolution.
What role does logic and reasoning play in all this?
It is important to understand how logic and reasoning completely shape our thoughts, conclusions, and beliefs. One of my most favorite detectives is Sherlock Holmes. He was a vertical thinker, or someone who can think outside the box. Vertical thinkers are able to think logically and in a linear fashion, which allows them to find solutions without being distracted by extraneous information. They can see all possible outcomes and consequences before making any decisions. They are able to think outside the box and see what may not be obvious to others.
Can you tell me more about logic and reasoning and why it is important?
Reasoning involves using our 5 senses, but also requires using the brain. Man's reasoning can be difficult when the topics are beyond man's understanding. We simply are limited to our 5 senses and the mind's thought process and ability to reason. While we might all like to believe that we are rational and logical, the sad fact is that we are constantly under the influence of cognitive biases that distort our thinking, influence our beliefs, and sway the decisions we make each and every day. Sometimes these biases are fairly obvious, others are so subtle that they are almost impossible to notice. We also tend to be overly influenced by the first piece of information that we hear, a phenomenon referred to as the anchoring bias or anchoring effect. Did you know there are over 146 different types of logic and reasoning manipulation tactics? Here's a list of some of the more common methods. Logical fallacy, false cause, slippery slope, ambiguity, Texas sharpshooter, correlation implies causation, no true Scotsman, composition division, black or white, begging the question, middle ground, bandwagon and strawman. Special pleading, loaded question, burden of proof, fallacy, gambler's fallacy, appeal to emotion, appeal to nature, appeal to authority, anecdotal, ad hominem, tu quoque, and sophistry.
Did I just hear you say there were over 146 types of logical fallacies?
That's correct. Anyone using these fallacy tactics can make a persuasive argument for anything.
I'm beginning to see how these tactics are used every day in politics and court cases.
Here are 4 famous evil characters you easily recognize. Lee Harvey Oswald, who murdered President Kennedy. Charles Manson, the psycho who in the 60s manipulated teenagers to murder 7 innocent people. Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the 9/11 Twin Tower disasters. And everyone knows this madman. Adolf Hitler, who murdered over 11 million people. With the exception of Oswald, these characters were able to convince others to carry out their evil intentions using manipulation.
As a Christian, what are your thoughts on all this?
Years ago, our society was based on Christian absolutes. People knew what was right and what was wrong. Behaviors such as sexual deviancy, easy divorce, public lawlessness, abortion on demand, pornography, and public nudity were considered to be wrong, and valued judgments were basically built on biblical principles. Most people accepted or respected a belief in God. When Christian absolutes were the basis of society, immoral activities such as homosexual or lesbian lifestyles and pornography were outlawed. The presence within us of an objective moral law, written on our hearts, points to the existence of an eternal goodness and intelligence which created us and our universe, enables us to think, and is the eternal source of our best and deepest values.
How does manipulation work?
Today, there has been a fundamental shift where society is now based on a relative morality. That is, a person can do what he likes and is answerable to no one but himself, as long as the majority of people can be persuaded that their interests are not being threatened. Many Christians have been deceived into believing they have no right to impose their views on society. Society has become corrupt, shifting these beliefs into government policies, then into schools and universities, and finally into church congregations and church leaders. As we see the loss of the foundation of the authority of God's Word in our Western nations, we are also seeing a massive decline in Christian morality in society. Even the great nation of America is on a downward spiral as we see the absolutes of Christianity being eliminated from the culture on almost daily basis. Christian leaders are doing exactly what the atheists are encouraging them to do by redefining Bible history and doctrine reinterpretation. Naturalism fails to provide a standard for strong objective morals or right from wrong. Everything simply becomes a matter of subjective opinion. Without God, we lose our sense of accountability and belief in moral absolutes because we no longer believe that there is a divine judge to whom we are ultimately responsible. These men are recognized as highly intelligent scientists of the scientific community. They are responsible for promoting false scientific theories that completely undermine the belief in God and any form of theology. However, all of their ideas are only theories and not fact.
It's interesting that their theories concentrate on disproving religion rather than promoting actual science in their field of expertise. I find it odd that the world accepts one individual's ideas as true facts.
Charles Darwin was a geologist and biologist, who in 1858 originated the theory of evolution. Ernest Rutherford was a master in mathematics and physics. In the 1890s, he is responsible for developing radiometric dating. Georges Lemaître was a cosmologist and Catholic priest. In 1931, he proposed the Big Bang theory. Stephen Hawking studied cosmology and physics. In the 70s and 80s, he promoted theories like the Big Bang and other anti-theism beliefs. Carl Sagan studied physics and astronomy also from the 70s and 80s. He believed in the origin of life on other planets and a strong supporter of science as opposed to any religious beliefs. Richard Dawkins is a biologist and ethologist. He is a devoted atheist and published a book in 2006 that harshly criticized any form of religion. Look at this timeline for these secular scientists. Darwin's theory of evolution. Earth formation using radiometric dating estimates. And the Big Bang theory. Notice how these three theories occurred in the last 165 years. Did you know? Prior to Charles Darwin's theory on evolution, the prevailing scientific theory of life's origins and development had held that species were fixed, and that they never changed. God was accepted as the creator of life. Microevolution is a study of evolution within the same species. Macroevolution is the study of crossover evolution, where new species come from other species. Darwin defined evolution as the idea that species change over time, give rise to new species, and share a common ancestor. DNA genes are the cellular agents that are necessary for repair and survival. Thus, DNA is necessary for the survival of DNA, but it would have been impossible for repair genes to evolve before ordinary DNA. And it would have been impossible for ordinary DNA to evolve before repair genes evolved. Here we see another impossible barrier for evolution. Biologists understand that all cells can only come from pre-existing cells. Life can never come from inanimate, non-living matter. Life can never come into existence by chance. Even evolutionists admit that the theory of evolution and the laws of thermodynamics are completely incompatible with each other. As leading atheist Richard Dawkins correctly remarked, the more statistically improbable a thing is, the less we can believe that it just happened by blind chance. Superficially, the obvious alternative to chance is an intelligent designer. When we use operational science, the kind involving observable, repeatable, testable results, we have never observed, repeated, or been able to test animal kind A turning into animal kind B.
I have two questions. If a single cell created man, wouldn't a second cell be needed to create a female at the same time? And how did the reproduction process between man and woman develop in the beginning? Kinda makes evolution seem ridiculous.
You make excellent points. I think it's safe to say evolution is a dead theory.
I keep hearing about all these archaeological finds proving evolution is correct. What's that all about?
These are some of the more famous archaeological so-called discoveries. Nebraska man came from a pig tooth. Orc man was a donkey skull. Ramapithecus man came from a baboon skull. Piltdown man simply was a hoax. And the famous Lucy was made of plaster of Paris. Neanderthal man was determined to have severely bowed legs because he had rickets disease. He was assuredly not proof from the fossil record of a half-ape, half-man transitional creature. Then there was a pitiful attempt to first connect a toe bone to other bones found 10 miles away from it, and then depict them as proof of evolution. The bottom line? There are absolutely no fossil transitional forms exist anywhere in the fossil record. DNA cannot be combined between species. There is no dog man, no fish man, and no ape man. If evolution was true, why do we still have monkeys, fish, and all the other species we supposedly evolved from? Why didn't they evolve? The next section deals with the formation of the Earth. Geology is a field of science of collection and classification of rocks and fossils, and development of theoretical reconstructions of the historical events that formed those rock layers and fossils. The study of geology is only about 200 years old. Geologists now recognize that most rock units are the result of widespread, high-intensity processes, accomplishing in minutes what has traditionally been attributed to a slow and gradual process. Mount St. Helens provides a rare opportunity to study transient geologic processes, which, produced within a few months, changes what geologists might otherwise assume required many thousands of years. The volcano challenges our way of thinking about how the Earth works, how it changes, and the time scale attached. These processes and their effects allow Mount St. Helens to serve as a miniature laboratory for catastrophism, a viable theory of geological change, and may have far-reaching implications on other scientific disciplines and philosophical inquiries. There are excellent videos of this entire process causing science to rethink prior theories. Dr. Jason Lisle is an astrophysicist who double-majored in physics and astronomy with a minor in mathematics. Here's a short clip of one of his seminars on geology and radiometric carbon dating.
What about the rocks in which these fossils are found? Don't rocks take millions of years to form as mud slowly turns into rock? Here's a set of car keys embedded inside solid rock. I'll leave it to you to think whether that happened millions of years ago. Here's a man-made clock embedded inside solid rock. That's the one rock we know exactly when it happened, right? It's got a built-in clock. That's kind of neat. What about these layers? Look at all those layers of sediment, some of which are lithified. They've turned into rock. There's a person down there at the bottom for scale. Huh. Surely those took millions of years to form, right? Actually, none of those existed before 1980. Those are sedimentary rock layers that were laid down by the pyroclastic flow from the Mount St. Helens eruption. One volcano did that, and a fairly minor volcano. Mount St. Helens is pretty piddly by volcano standards. It laid down all those rock layers, and I think the top layer is a subsequent eruption. And then it cut through those layers too, because it sloshed a wave in Spirit Lake that went through and cut out a canyon 1/40th the scale of the Grand Canyon in a matter of hours. One volcano. One. That's what it did. Laid down those rock layers, made a canyon 1/40th the scale of the Grand Canyon in a matter of hours. It doesn't take millions of years to form rock layers or to form canyons. It just takes catastrophic conditions. Think about the worldwide flood. The Bible says all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. That might refer to underwater volcanoes, we're not sure, but imagine all the volcanoes on earth going off. If one volcano can do that, imagine what all of them can do. They used to tell you that these layers right here, these horizontal layers, laminations, like you'll find in the Grand Canyon, that they're annual. Each one was formed the year after the next. And you add it up, there's millions of them. Therefore, millions of years. See, you creationists are crazy. The evidence indicates millions of years. Except these are not from the Grand Canyon. These are layers that were laid down in the Mount St. Helens eruption. None of these existed before 1980. It turns out the way the mud flows produces those laminations. They were all formed at the same time. They're not annual. And those are the same type of features you find in the Tepete sandstone, which extends throughout most of the United States and Canada. It's a continental catastrophe that did this, at least continental. A global flood would do that. We find trees buried vertically in rock layers. That's interesting, without roots. Trees without roots buried in rock. Don't most trees have roots? I mean, that's kind of odd, isn't it? A little bit of coal down there at the base. I was always taught that coal forms from peat in swamps, that over millions of years the peat becomes coal. But the funny thing is we find, occasionally in coal you'll find impressions of leaves of plants, and that tells you what kind of plants were there. And they're not the kind of plants that grow in swamps. They're the kind of plants that grow in mountain rainforests. So think about that. What would uproot a tree in a mountain rainforest and deposit it quickly and compress the material? Worldwide flood would do that. See, we know how this happens now. Why is it that we find trees buried vertically without roots? Mount St. Helens did it. Because what it did is there was the explosion uprooted trees like matchsticks. You can see videos of this. It's amazing to watch. And then it blasted them in. So that's why they don't have roots. They were derooted when the volcano exploded. And then they tended to get pushed into Spirit Lake, nearby lake, where they tended to float vertically because of the little remnants of the root that were heavier than the rest of the tree. Occasionally they'll be horizontal, but most of them are vertical until they get waterlogged, and then they sink down, and the sediment from that explosion then covers them up. We know how this happens. And it's not millions of years. It's catastrophic conditions. So you see, when we take a look at rock layers and the fossils within them, we apply good observational science, we see what happens today, we find it's consistent with creation and a global flood.
Radiometric dating was developed in the early 20th century as a method to estimate the ages of rocks, fossils, and the Earth. People have been led to believe that radiometric dating methods have proved the Earth to be billions of years old. Radioisotope dating, also referred to as radiometric dating, is the process of estimating the ages of rocks from the decay of radioactive elements in them. Radioisotope dating is commonly used to date igneous rocks. These are rocks which form when hot, molten material cools and solidifies. Sedimentary rocks, which contain most of the world's fossils, are not commonly used in radioisotope dating. These types of rocks are comprised of particles from many pre-existing rocks which were transported mostly by water and redeposited somewhere else. Here's another interesting fact. Secular naturalists do not believe there was a great worldwide flood and attempt to use carbon dating as proof the flood never existed. Here's a list of only a few major errors in radiometric dating. The actual dates were within the last 1,000 years, yet the false dates are in millions of years.
That's a pretty major flaw in radiometric dating.
The next clip is Dr. Jason Lyle on radiometric dating.
What about geology? We need to talk about rocks now and fossils, that kind of stuff. And the first myth that I need to blow up is the idea that we know these rocks are billions of years old because of radiometric dating. That's what you'll be taught if you end up going to a secular university at some point, or frankly, if you read a secular textbook or watch the media or anything. Radiometric dating. So how does that work? Well, let me show you how it works and how it really doesn't. So we're all made up of atoms, right? These little particles that have protons and neutrons in the nucleus and electrons swirling around. Most atoms are stable, which means they will remain the same type of atom forever. Like carbon-12 will remain carbon-12 forever. And most atoms are like that. But there are some atoms that are unstable or radioactive. And what that means is they would really rather be a different type of atom. Like uranium, this is supposed to be uranium-238. It will spontaneously change into thorium-234. You don't have to do anything to it. It'll sit there and be uranium for a while, and then pop, it'll give off 2 protons and 2 neutrons and turn into thorium-234. Thorium-234 is also unstable or radioactive. And so it'll sit there for a while, and then suddenly it'll turn into the next element, which turns into the next one, and so on. And it emits energy when it does this, okay? All the way down to lead-206. Lead-206 is stable. Once it reaches lead-206, it'll remain lead-206 forever, okay? And so the bottom line is, if I had a chunk of solid uranium, and I waited for a long time, it would have some uranium and some lead in it, and eventually it would only be lead. Uranium spontaneously changes into lead. And the rate at which this happens is very slow. Actually, for a given atom, you don't know when it's going to change. It seems to be random. But if you have a large collection of atoms, statistically, you know that it would take this much time for it to change into lead. It's kind of like popcorn. You don't know when the next kernel's going to pop, but you do know that after 2.5 minutes, you're done, right? So the idea is I have a rock that has some uranium and some lead in it, okay? And I can, that I've dug up from the earth, and I could figure out when it was all uranium, because I know the rate at which uranium changes into lead. Does that make sense? But how do I know it's all uranium to begin with? And by the way, evolutionists do not assume that it was 100% uranium to begin with. It might have had some lead in it to begin with. Well, how much lead should we start with? Well, you tell me how old you want the rock to be, I'll tell you how much lead it started with. Right? Okay. So that's one of the assumptions of radiometric dating. There are 3 primary assumptions that are involved, because you need to understand, folks, you can't measure the age of something scientifically. People have misconceptions. They think you pick up a rock, you scan it with your tricorder, it measures the age of coals, and then tells you the age of the rock. That's not how it works. What you're measuring are ratios of uranium to lead, and then you're trying to make a guess about what the initial ratio of uranium to lead was. And assuming that the rate's constant, you arrive at an age estimate. Let's suppose I had an hourglass in here. When you all came into the room and there was an hourglass that looked like that. And I say, how long ago did I turn that over? You'd say, well, it's an hourglass, so I'd say about a half an hour. I'd say, wrong, I got you. I actually turned it over only 1 minute ago, but already a lot of the sand was in the bottom chamber. You see? You can't assume that all the sand was in the top chamber. You can't assume that the rock was all uranium to begin with. Sand going from the top chamber to the bottom is like uranium turning into lead. How do you know what it started with? And secularists, they're not stupid. They've got some ideas about how to make a guess about the initial uranium to lead, but it is a guess about the initial uranium to lead. How do you know that I didn't add sand when you weren't looking? Uranium is leachable in salt water. It can move in and out of the rock. It's not a closed system. How do you know the throat of the bottle's always been the same size? How do we know that the sand has always flown from the top to the bottom at the same rate that it does today? Now, with an hourglass, that's probably a pretty safe assumption. But we don't know exactly why radioactive decay happens at the rate that it does. And therefore, it might have been different in the past. And we think there's very good evidence that, in fact, radioactive decay happened much faster in the past. We know you can change it. I was taught in school, I went through a public school system, I was taught that nothing can change the rate of radioactive decay. We now know that is false. Scientists have been able to speed up certain kinds of radioactive decay in a laboratory by a factor of 1 billion. The rhenium-osmium reaction, we can make it go 1 billion times quicker. All you have to do is strip away the electrons from the atom, and it'll decay much quicker. So there could be processes in nature that do that. So here's the thing. These are some of the assumptions of radiometric dating, that you know the initial ratio of uranium to lead or potassium, argon, etc., that the decay rate is constant. There's compelling evidence it's not. The rate research team did some wonderful research where they all but demonstrated that radioactive decay was faster in the past. And third, the system is closed, that no materials moved in or out. But we know that one or more of these is false because we've tested radiometric dating on rocks of known age. When Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980 and there was some subsequent eruption, it produced brand new rocks from the magma. And when the rock hardens, that's supposed to set the 0 point of the clock, because when it's magma, minerals can move in and out. So we took brand new rocks, we sent them in and had them radiometrically dated. We sent them to a secular lab so we couldn't be accused of bias. And they came back, these brand new rocks, less than a year old, came back with estimated ages of hundreds of thousands to millions of years. That's a fact. Radiometric dating has been shown to not work on rocks of known age. It's assumed to work on rocks of unknown age. That's the bottom line. Be kind of like if I gave you a calculator. Merry Christmas, here you go. 2 plus 2 equals 57,423.1. I say, don't worry, it works on big numbers. Would you be satisfied with that? Would you say, oh yeah, this is a good gift? No, you'd say, I think I want to trade this in for something else, something that works. That's radiometric dating. It has been shown to not work on rocks of known age. Now, occasionally it'll give the right answer. Occasionally it'll give a negative answer. Did you know that? You can hold in your hand a rock that, according to radiometric dating, has not formed yet and will not form for another 1,000,000 years. It's true. The isochron methods sometimes give negative ages. Anyway, what about carbon dating? Some people have the impression that carbon dating gives the millions of years. It never does. It never does. Carbon dating, now it's based on assumptions too, but we think with carbon dating they're a little more reliable. Because for one thing, when we carbon date stuff of known age, it tends to give the right answer. Or within the ballpark of the right answer, within a factor of 10. So it's not going to give millions of years. The way carbon dating works is most carbon is C12. It's got 6 protons, 6 neutrons. There's a variety of carbon called C14 that has 2 extra neutrons, which makes it unstable. Okay? So C14 is produced in the upper atmosphere when cosmic rays bombard nitrogen atoms. That converts them to C14, and they would like to convert back to nitrogen, and they will do so with a half-life of 5,700 years. C14 does not last millions of years. It lasts 5,700 years is the half-life. So the idea is when you're alive, you are eating plants. Plants get there's carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and 1 atom in a trillion of those carbons is C14. So the plants take that in, they use the carbon to build themselves, and then they release the oxygen. So plants have a little bit of C14 in them. You eat the plants, or animals eat the plants and you eat the animals. Either way, you get new C14 in you. So a small fraction of the atoms in your body are unstable. You're all slightly unstable, right? Now, the C14 in your body is constantly decaying back to nitrogen, but you replenish it because you continue to eat, right? Most of us do it every day. And so you replace it with new C14. And so the C14 to C12 in you is about the same as it is in the environment until you die. And then when you die, the C14 simply decays away. So while you're alive, it stays constant, and then the moment of death, it starts to decay away. And if something were 1,000,000 years old, it would have 0 C14 in it. Because remember, the half-life is only 5,700 years. Carbon-14 does not last that long. And yet we find it in all kinds of fossils. Dinosaur fossils, they have C14 in them, which means they can't be millions of years old. Diamonds that secular scientists think are 1 to 2 billion years old, they have C14 in them. Can't be billions of years old. There are hundreds of processes like that that set the age of the world as much less than the millions, let alone billions of years.
I'm hearing a lot of chatter about the James Webb Space Telescope. What can you tell us about it?
The James Webb Space Telescope, launched on December 25, 2021, provides further proof that the Big Bang theory was incorrect. Astronomers are beginning to abandon the Big Bang theory. Although it is still the dominant model at present, increasing numbers of physicists and astronomers are realizing that the Big Bang simply is not a good explanation of how the universe came into existence. In the May 22, 2004 issue of New Scientist, there appeared an open letter to the scientific community written primarily by secular scientists who challenged the Big Bang. These scientists pointed out that the copious arbitrary assumptions and the lack of successful Big Bang predictions challenge the legitimacy of this theory. At the beginning of the seminar, I said there would be some humor involved. Well, listen to this. When evolutionists were asked why transitional fossils were never found,
"The transitional fossils are there, we just haven't had enough time to find them."
secular geologists were asked, how do you know how old rock layers are? They replied,
"Fossils tell us how old the rock layers are."
then how do you know how old fossils are?
"Well, rock layers tell us how old the fossils are."
Atheist Richard Dawkins admitted the universe could have originated from an intelligent source and was asked what the intelligent source was. His response was,
"Aliens."
how do you like these answers? I didn't make this up.
Well, that certainly explains everything. It seems everything in this presentation is about choice.
It all boils down to, is the Bible correct or man's views? Did God create man or did evolution? Did God create the earth or was it formed by chance? Did God create the universe or was it formed by the Big Bang? Does God exist or not? Do you believe facts or theories? And finally, do you want to learn or be ignorant? The choice is yours.
Well, Rick, after hearing everything you have to say, what is your position on science and technology? Are you for it or against it?
Science and technology are wonderful things that I use on a regular basis. However, it is the individuals who cross the line and attempt to use these tools for evil. But I'd like to point out that crossing the line can also work in reverse. For example, many times we see a secular naturalist become a Christian.
And how old do you think the universe is?
No one knows the answer to these questions. The Bible doesn't address the age of the earth or universe specifically, so I don't have a strong position on actual ages.
Okay. Rick, what's the bottom line? What advice can you give us?
I guess I would say, regarding Christianity versus secular naturalism worldviews, it is clear to me that the beliefs and theories of secular naturalists have little substance when it comes to science and logic. My suggestions to everyone: be aware of things that guide your way of thinking. Primarily watch out for logical fallacy tactics that trick or manipulate your beliefs, and don't be too quick to follow the majority. As R.C. Sproul quoted, "It is critical to understand and take seriously the ideas that are shaping us," and Charles Stanley quotes, "Trust in God does not mean that we turn off our minds or skip through life without any thought about our surroundings or the challenges we face. Fools remain oblivious. The wise stay alert and take appropriate action."
Well, that was a lot of information you shared with us. Would you mind summarizing all this?
Sure. I'll begin with the secular naturalist beliefs. Secular theories are centered around the sciences and tend to reject things that can't be explained. The primary goal of these views is to prove God does not exist, a completely non-scientific, non-relevant idea that doesn't support the other scientific claims. You cannot disprove any given thing exists. Science does not and cannot address supernatural entities. Science cannot explain God, or what is beyond space. It can't explain emotions or the mind-thought process. To make a claim against supernatural entities is therefore unscientific. Science cannot explain good and evil, right and wrong, love and hate. Science can tell us how to do something, but not why we should do or not do it. Naturalism fails to provide a standard for strong objective morals or right or wrong. Everyone can agree evolution is a false theory. There are no transitional fossils. Life by chance would have to occur simultaneously for male and female in order to reproduce. DNA proves life came from an intelligent source. We have proof carbon-14 dating is not a reliable method for determining the age of rocks, fossils, and the Earth. The Big Bang Theory has been proven to be incorrect based on all the James Webb Telescope discoveries.
Hey, I have a theory. We've seen how God's intelligent DNA design proves God created life. So if God created life, then the Bible is correct. If the Bible is correct, then God had to have created the earth and the universe. Where can we find more of your research material?
You can go to my YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@rick-1189. Here you can view this presentation or view other videos and libraries of other YouTube channels. Here is a list of some of the reputable sources supporting information in this presentation. Jason Lyle, Georgia Perdome, John Lennox, Stephen Meyer, Ken Ham, Michael Behe, Brian Osborne, John MacArthur, R.C. Sproul, Charles Stanley, and Stephen Lawson.